This section of scripture that we're looking at right now, section that involves the resurrection of Jesus, is the most important text in the Bible. It doesn't matter if all the other stories are true. If this one is not true, then the rest of it doesn't matter. I mean, it will be good history, it will be good information, but it doesn't matter. So that's what we're looking at. So we come to we've had the crucifixion, we've had the burial. And by the way, I want to give a plug for Right Now Media, an Easter series that's on there. If you look at the last two, Black Saturday, I think, and then the one about Sunday, they're really good. They're really good. So we're at the resurrection. We're at the resurrection. So the Sabbath is past. It's the first day of the week. It's early. The women seem to have started out before sunrise. The women are, at least in Mark and Luke, are going to take spices to make an additional memorial to Jesus. They're going to take their spices and their ointments, and they're going to anoint the body, or that's their intention. Now, Matthew, perhaps because of the way he ends this chapter, he just says they're going to look at the tomb. He's not going to draw attention to the point that they might disturb the tomb. He just says they're going to look at the tomb. So the time is early on the first day of the week, after the Sabbath. Their purpose, to visit the tomb, add additional spices and ointments to the body of Jesus. What did they expect to find?
Jesus' body.
Say it again.
Jesus' body.
They expected to find a dead Jesus. They expected to find a tomb with a rock in front of it. A large stone in front of it. In fact, they're discussing this on the way in Mark 16, verse 3, as to who is going to move the stone. And maybe you're looking at the women and you're saying, oh, that's kind of silly. Why didn't you think of that before going? That's a wrong attitude to take toward the women. Let's do some strange stuff. The women. If you go back to Luke 8, verses 2 through 3, you find a group of women were with Jesus all throughout his ministry. This group of women supported him and supported the others. There, Luke names three. He names Mary, called Magdalene, out of whom 7 demons were cast. He names Joanna, and this may be the basis for the story in Luke of Jesus appearing before Herod, because she was the wife of Herod's steward, Chusa. He names Susanna. Nothing else is said about her. And then he ends it by saying that there were many others. When you go through the crucifixion story, Matthew 27, 55 through 56, you have a list of women. Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James and Joseph, or Joseph, the mother of Zebedee's children. The lists are a little bit different, adding names where some gospels just use titles. But if you go to Mark 15, 40 through 41, you always have Mary Magdalene named for the most part. Then you have Mary, mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome for the mother of Zebedee's children. And then many other women had come up with him to Jerusalem. Now, several weeks ago, I was doing the thing about Jesus going out for the crucifixion. And I said maybe he addressed some of his comments to the group of women from Galilee. That's probably not the case. The comments there are probably addressed to women in Jerusalem only. So we come to Luke 23, 49. He doesn't name any of the women here. He had already named them in Luke 8. He just says that there were many women who had followed from Galilee. They stood at a distance watching these things. John 19:25, standing near the cross was his mother's sister, probably Salome, Mary, wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Then you have list of women at the burial. Matthew 27:61, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, which I assume is Mary, wife of Clopas, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Mark 15:47 says Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of Joseph. Luke 23:55 through 56 just says the women followed, and they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Keep that in mind. Then you come to the empty tomb. Matthew 28, verse 1, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Mark 16:1, Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James, and Salome. Luke 24:1 tells us again that it was on the first day of the week. They were going to the tomb to take spices that they had prepared. And he names them in verse 10. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, who we met in Luke chapter 8, Mary, the mother of James, and other women with them. So it's not just 3 or 4 women. It's at least 5 and more. And John 20 just names Mary Magdalene. Now, we talked about what they expected to find. They expected to find a tomb with a rock in front of it, a big rock. A rock that they couldn't move by themselves. So, 1907, a theologian by the name of Kearsarge Lake wrote a book called The Historical Evidence for the Resurrection of Jesus Christ. On pages 251 to 253 or thereabouts, he proposed the idea that the women went to the wrong tomb. Okay? So, while it was still dark, they were confused. They just came to a tomb and it was open and they assumed it was the right tomb. And there was actually a gardener there, or an attendant, who tried to tell them that it was the wrong tomb. He amends the text of Mark 16, verse 6 to read, he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He's not here. Look, there is the place they laid him." So what did he do? What did he do with that piece of the text? Huh?
Took all the power.
Yeah. What words did he leave out? He has risen. He is risen. Now, think about this for a minute. What were the women looking for?
Jesus.
Yeah, they had spices, so they were going to anoint his body.
Okay. But what specifically would they see before they would see the body of Jesus?
The large stone in front of the tomb.
Okay. They were looking for a tomb with a rock in front of it. A big rock. Exactly. So if it's too dark for the women to know where they're going, wouldn't it be too dark for an attendant?
Be working in the garden.
Yeah, to be working in the cemetery or the tombs, whatever you call that. In this theory assumes another thing. It assumes that everybody else forgot where the tomb was at.
Yeah.
Weren't there guards in front of the tomb, though?
Yeah. So it assumes that Joseph of Arimathea would have forgotten where he buried Jesus. But all through this story, what were the women doing?
Yeah, they were following.
They were across from the thing where he was put in.
Yeah, they saw where they laid him. And not only where they laid him, but how they laid him. So it assumes another thing. It assumes that the Romans forgot.
Like the guard got this door.
Yeah.
them boys guarding that wrong, they're gonna be in trouble.
How? It assumes that the Jewish authorities forgot.
Regarding empty too.
So if, if on the day of Pentecost, Peter's standing up and he's saying, Jesus was raised from the dead, wouldn't the Jewish authorities, hey, you've got a screw loose. I'll go down here and we'll show you this. So the women had come to the right tomb. They knew where they were going. They knew their intention.
Greg, I was throw this in there. Go back on the backstory a little bit. Every man that was connected in any fashion to Jesus was hiding.
Yeah.
Women could move a little bit more freely. And, they were there at the foot of the cross.
Right.
And they stayed close to Jesus the whole time. So,
Yeah.
Kathy, remember that story there a little bit, because most of them were hiding.
Yes, they were hiding. And maybe that's part of the reason that the resurrection story first comes through women. And then you want to think about something about how at the time they viewed the testimony of women. They weren't reliable. Now, to take the story and say it's a made-up story, or to make the story up, you would have started with someone else carrying the message. In fact, there's an attitude toward women that, it was better to burn the Torah than to teach it to a woman. Attitudes like that. So they're not hopeful. So here in the story, again, you have a marginalized group, the women, who are honored to tell the story of the resurrection. Take that all the way back to the beginning of the story, the birth. You had a marginalized group, the shepherds, who got to tell the story that he's born. Any questions or comments about that background? Yes?
Not true. The women were supporting him.
Yeah.
It doesn't say they got the money from their husband. It says they're supporting, so they had to have income of some sort. You think?
Yep.
Where did money come from?
I presume they worked or they inherited it.
Or maybe they did have husbands that supported them.
Yeah. And, especially Joanna, the wife of Herod's, somehow I'm not sure Herod would have been real happy with Jesus' wife, but yeah.
That attitude you just mentioned about the Torah brings significant interest to the story of Mary and Martha.
Yeah.
When Mary is learning at the feet of Jesus, which wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
And Jesus encouraged it.
Yes.
So he broke the rules.
He broke the rules. He included people that weren't supposed to be included. So, look at the angel's message. Matthew 28, verse 5. The message, he is risen. They first say, do not be afraid. He's not here, for he has been raised as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. That's a single angel in Matthew, and I'm not sure, but is it the angel that was sitting on the stone? I'm not sure. Mark 16:6. There was a young man dressed in white, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Do not be afraid. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. In Luke 24, it says they were perplexed. And there were two men that were there in white. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. That's the message. That is the Christian message. He is risen. He is risen from the dead. So the angels give them a message. Now, I'm not going there with, okay, were there one angel, two angels? There was probably multiple angels, at least two, and one spoke. Be the easiest way to deal with it. Or maybe, and here's a possibility, that the women came at different times. And the different groups of women had a different experience. Never really thought about that until yesterday. There was a guy that proposed the idea that one group of women brought the spices, another one brought the oils or the ointments. And they started out, and they didn't quite meet up together at the same time. Mary Magdalene seems to have gotten there first. So, they were given a mission, which was go tell the disciples in Mark 16:7, which is Peter's gospel. He gave that to Mark to write down. Go tell the disciples and tell Peter.
Why did he break it up? Tell Peter, Peter was a disciple also.
Yeah, but Peter messed up. Peter denied him 3 times. So Peter needed a special message.
Still okay.
You're still accepted. I still want you. Luke 24:8 says, remember how he told you while still in Galilee. The Son of Man must be handed over to sinners, be crucified, and on the third day rise again. They remembered his words. And there are 3 examples of that in each of the synoptic gospels. Where Matthew 16:21 through 28, Matthew 17:22 through 23, Matthew 20:17 through 19. And then in Mark 8, Mark 9, Mark 10, Luke 9, and Luke 18. Those 3 times that he told them this was going to happen. And maybe, just going to throw this out there, the women heard it when the men did not. That seems to be the case with Mary, who anointed him before his death. Okay, Matthew 28 tells of their reaction. They left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell the disciples. And then I'm going to throw a monkey wrench at you. Mark 16:8. That's where the Gospel of Mark ends. That's where the writing of Mark ends. Verses 9 through 20 are an addition by some other author. That's not a problem. It's kind of like John 8, 1 through 12. It doesn't belong there, most likely. But the story is still authentic. So, Mark 16:8, they went out from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. In Mark and Peter, they want belief without seeing. Do we sometimes read the story and we forget the amazement, the awe, the fear coming into an event that God intervened into the world? So maybe Mark ends his gospel here to tell a suffering church in Rome, a church, a place where Peter will die. Or maybe he had already died. that suffering comes with belief. Okay, I want to read this little quote here. Kind of makes sense to me. The abrupt ending, which intends to leave us in the place of believing without seeing, reflects Mark's original witness and father in the faith, Simon Peter. I close with his words spoken to us today. They are his invitation to continue to engage with our imagination. You love him, though you have not seen him. And though not seeing him now, you believe in him and rejoice with inexpressible and glorious joy. 1 Peter 1:8. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with some things. The women were faithful. These were the women from Galilee. They were faithful followers. They were devoted followers. They supported him. They traveled with him. They were close by at the crucifixion, at the burial. They were the first witnesses of the empty tomb. And they were the first to share the message, he is risen from the dead. The message they shared is a message of grace. And we already talked about that message specifically to Peter. You know, Peter must have been messed up at this time. He had denied him 3 times. Peter had said, Lord, you know, all the rest of them leave you. I won't. I'll die with you. All of us have messed up. We have not kept our commitment to him, but it's still a message of grace. The message they shared was a message of hope. Death does not have to be final. Death may be overcome. Okay. Any questions or observations that you want to make?
Oh, great. I think that little side thing over here, we need to do a little bit more evaluation of the role of women in the church from different perspectives. If you just look at these women, I think you have a pattern of all women. Just look at what they did, how they participated, how they accepted what they accepted.
Absolutely.
Their whole demeanor says a whole lot.
Absolutely. I don't know if everybody heard what Chris said, but he said we need to take a look at the story and evaluate our ideas of what women, the roles that they play in church. And I tend to agree. Other observations? Other observations, points that you want to make, disagreements?
I love the way the women are shown this. They are throughout time, throughout scripture, all shown to be the backbone and source of
Faith.
help. It's interesting that, you know, we go back to Genesis and we tend to forget this. Let's make men and women in our image.
Mm-hmm.
And we take those scriptures later on, submitting and all that kind of thing. And we forget, and these examples are so beautiful to see. These ladies, especially Mary, that she was taken in. I mean, these ladies know what Jesus did. They are passionately in love with this man who saved their life, saved their soul, gave them eternal life. And for them to sit back, and it's no different than today. These ladies are watching the entire time. They're watching these men sometimes, oh yeah, they're strong, they're tough, they're going to die. You know, they're seeing all this, they know that. And now they're seeing them hiding like little kids over the room, scared to death. But they're scared, they're hiding. When Jesus comes to that room, when he appears to them, they're not in prayer, they're not in interceding, they're scared to death.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they realize who they are. It's like, oh yes. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, look what we did. So they condemn themselves immediately. Immediately, and I hope you get that part too. He, you know, he's with you. And he does it twice. And we got to go back there. Get back to the women. Mary and them know when they're going to they're in the big rock. There's some room in the garden, that rock, that are not about to move. They're not going to move that women. They're going to laugh at them or whatever the case may be. And Mary and them know that, don't they? But Jesus is in there, so they're going. They're
Right. Yeah.
They found all this stuff. Yeah, it's the power that comes from the resources that they have to be able to help them. They can take care of anything they need to. We need to learn from this. It's incredible. And he tells us these beautiful stories. So we know that.
Yep.
We're learning about them.
Yep. We forget the mystery, and I don't know how we get to some of the conclusions that we make sometimes.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.